Hi everyone, it's Mr. Barden here. Today I'm going to be talking about how you can load up multiple sounds in one object and be able to trigger them using different buttons. So let's roll the intro and get right onto it. All right, everyone. So today, as I said earlier, we're going to go in and just start by loading up some sounds. I've got a sketch opened up here, and I've already got the tone library loaded up, ready to go. I'm going to have this and everything else I mentioned. Everything's going to be down in the description below, so be sure to check out anything if you're not sure about it. And if there's anything else you think I may have forgotten, go ahead and put that down in the comments, and I will get that info to you ASAP. All right, so as we are going, let's look at this here. So I've got most of the URL to a sound file repository right here. And I'm just going to add one more variable, and this is going to be, I'm going to call it multiplayer. So last time we talked about how you can load in a sound into an object called Tone.Player. And if you need a refresher on that, check out my previous video. I'll stick a card in the top of the screen for you. Check that out and then come back to this video because I kind of expect everyone to have at least learned some of the basics from that previous lesson before jumping in here. All right, so today we're going to make a multiplayer, a player object that's going to have multiple sounds loaded in, hence the name. So let's go in. So just like we did with our Tone.Player object, we're going to create this inside of the preload function. So that way everything is loaded up before we start and it's all ready to go. So multiplayer is going to become a new, and this is where you're going to want to pay attention. Tone.Players. All right, so where this is different than before is last time we had Tone.Player, and that loaded up a single sound file. Tone.Players with an S, again, I don't like how they named it that way, but it kind of makes sense. It can just be very confusing if you're typing and trying to find where your bug is. But players with an S, the multiple of this, is essentially an object that loads in as many different instances of Tone.Player and wraps all of them in one name. In this case, multiplayer. So what we're going to be doing is going in and just kind of opening this up. Actually, I'm going to do this a little bit. I'm going to open up some curly braces right here and then open it up. And that is going to essentially open up the object. And then using the JSON notation, we'll be able to load in various sound files into here. So let's go. Let's pick some sound files. I've got this folder is the one I'm linked to in the code. So let's start with bubbles.mp3. All right, so bubbles, colon, is going to be we're going to be, what is this? Base URL plus, and then as a string, bubbles.mp3. All right, let's make sure I got that right. It was bubbles with a capital B. Yes. All right, so let's load in a few of these here. I'm going to copy. That's not what I wanted to copy. I'm going to copy this right there. So we can just separate this by a comma. I shouldn't have thought that through. So, and then we'll just kind of essentially, just like with every JSON object, we have the parameter name, colon, the value of that parameter. So the first one, we said bubbles, and it's going to be bubbles.mp3. Let's call this water. And this is going to be the same base URL plus aquabeat.mp3. Let's load in two more. All right. So let's see. I'll go car service.mp3. There we are. I'll call this one car. Plus car service.mp3. And last but not least, let's say tuning in. That sounds like something on a radio, so I'll say radio. And then just like all of the other ones, there we are. So the way we've loaded this up, this will be no different than if we went in and said, let bubbles, and then say bubbles equals new Tone.Player and did that. This is essentially no different than loading in 4 separate player objects, only now we've encapsulated all of them into one larger unit, and we can refer to all of them at once. Now, this can be a useful tool, but there are a few little drawbacks that I'll get into just a little bit later. So, all right, so we've loaded in the sounds. The next thing we have to do is then say .to destination. So that way we can actually hear them when I press the play button. That's going to be important. Never forget the to destination, because you have to route your audio to various places. In the next section, I'll be talking about how you can use this format along with different audio effects, and you have to route the audio signal from A to B to C through all the effects you want until you get to the final destination speakers. Are you having fun? A mayfly followed me in from doing laundry, and now Bean, my cat, is going crazy getting it. All right. So let's move on to the next portion. So we've made all of these sounds. Let's make some buttons in order to trigger them. So instead of saying let bubbles, actually I'll keep that there. Actually, no, I won't. I'll keep the other one. I'll comment it out. So we have that there. So we have multiplayer. So we have button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, stop, button. All right. So these aren't the best names for the buttons, but it'll get the job across for what we're doing just for today. Essentially, I'm going to make 4 play buttons and then a stop button for playing back all of these sounds. So let's go into the setup function right here. And we can go in and say button 1 is going to be a create button function. All right? And I'm just going to copy that. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, and 4. So again, just as a quick refresher, whenever you make a button, just by default, it's going to say undefined, and it's going to put the button at the bottom underneath the canvas, and nothing is going to happen when we click on it. So we're getting a little bit of an error here. It's not the end of the world, but it says, P5 was expecting that you would type something as an argument here. What that something is the word that you want to have appear on the button. So it could be, submit form here. And again, this is as a string. And if you want making a submission link page on your website, but this one I'm going to make say bubbles. This one will say water, car, and radio. I haven't listened to any of these, so no idea how accurate that'll be, but we're gonna see based on the names. So we have all of that right there. Again, that's just putting the name on the button. Again, it's not doing anything, and it's not anywhere on the canvas where we can really interact with it. So let's adjust this. We can say button 1 dot position, and the arguments are just the XY coordinates of where we go. So I'm going to say, actually, I'll say 50, comma, height divided by 2, button 2 dot position 100, and I'll make these all in a horizontal line. And button 3 dot position 150, comma, boop, 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 and last but not least, position you'll notice that when I did it this way, things overlapped a little bit. This will happen. The coordinate that you give it with the dot position method is for that top left corner, and then the size of the button is dependent on the text that you give it there. So if I wanted to, I could say move these over 125, 175, 225. Something like that. I'm going to leave them there, but you can really fine-tune the positions of your buttons. The last thing I'm going to do is make some functions that are going to be executed as a callback whenever we click on these buttons. Because right now, nothing happens. You can click on them all you want, but they're not going to do anything. So I'm going to make some functions. Function play bubbles. I'm going to make one and kind of walk you through the process and then just copy and paste a bunch of it just to save some time. So just like when we were working with sprites back with the P5 Play library and you set up a collision detector between the two sprites, you could call a callback function in order to execute some command whenever these two sprites interacted with each other. You can do the same thing with these buttons. So whenever you click on it, it will execute whatever function you tell it to. In this case, it's going to be play bubbles. If you wanted to, you could maybe make one big function that could then determine which button you clicked on and do a bunch of things like that. But for now, I'm going to make a separate small function for each sound. It's a little more typing, a little more time consuming, but I'm not going to be formulating a bunch of complex math. This is just showing off how this is going to go. So let's say function play bubbles. We're going to say multi-player. Again, so this will be the name of our object holding all of the sounds. And we're going to be using the .start method. However, there's something else we need. We can't just say multiplayer .start. I mean, technically we can. It's not going to give us an error, but it's not going to know which sound to play. In fact, if I was to click on the button after telling it to do stuff, we might get some errors then. But we have to tell it which of these 4 sounds it wants to play. Otherwise, it's not going to know what to do. So we're going to say multiplayer.player .start. And this is, again, another instance where it's a little confusing. So if you've watched my previous videos on this kind of subject, this was before Tone updated to its newest version. And they changed a little bit of the syntax. There used to be, to destination used to be something else. This is a new thing. And then this players.player is also a new method. It used to be .get, but now it's just .player. When you think about it, it's telling you which player inside of the multiplayer do you want. And you just type out the name as a string. So up here we have bubbles. That's what we gave it the name of right here. And you just say that as the argument for the .player method, and then we say .start. So now all we have to do is go up and say button 1 dot mouse pressed, and we say play bubbles. I need a capital B, and I misspelled play as well. Boom, everything shows up. So again, just as a quick reminder, just like with any callback function, you're wanting to just store the name of the function here. You don't want to execute it. So you don't type the parentheses here on line 25 like you have with these other functions that you want to execute. This is just saying, hey, store this, and then whenever it's clicked, then execute it as needed. So I'm going to play this sound. It's going to come through the computer. We'll see how it goes. Everything should be up and going. Here we go. That looked very loud on my meter. I'm gonna drop that down when I'm doing some editing. So if when you're listening to this, this shouldn't blow out your ears. But I just saw a bar of red on my screen, so I'm gonna saying this right now as a reminder. Hey, future Mr. Barden, lower the volume here. All right. All right. So let's go here. So instead of play bubbles, we can also get play water, play car, and play radio. And again, all we have to do is then just change the name of what we want here. So I have, what did I have? Water, car, and radio. So again, just make sure that all of the strings here match the names that you give your player, just right up there. And from there, you just have to be able to say, hey, multiplayer, find this specific player and start it. All right, hey everyone. So a little bit of a jump cut here. So I was just spending some time fixing a few errors and bugs that popped up, mostly because I just can't spell anything, as anyone who's watched these videos before is well aware. I figured you just didn't want me searching for 5 minutes trying to figure out why something wasn't working for a small typo. So just to make sure we're all on the same page before going forward, I've got these 4 functions right here. And all they say are, hey, multiplayer object, find a specific player and start it. And then the player is different for each function. Up here in setup, I've made and positioned these buttons. And then I've also said, hey, button 1, when pressed, you trigger play bubbles. And then play bubbles finds the bubbles sound, which then puts up the URL. Everything was loaded in function preload, and it plays the sound. So I'm going to just go through real quick, play through all 4 sounds, and then move on to the last thing of making a stop button. All right, so here is the bubbles sound. All right, here's the water sound. This one goes on for a little longer. The sound I've labeled car. And last but not least, the sound I've labeled radio. That's why we're going to put in a stop button. All right, that one's now ending. All right, so as you notice, some of these might be longer than you want to have go on. So that's why I'm going to make function, if I could type it all, stop sound. That's what I'm going to name it. So I'm going to make one more button. I called it stop button. It's going to be create button. It's going to be stop all sounds. This is what I'm going to type there. Stop button dot position. It's going to be, let's put this kind of at the bottom. There we are. That works. All right, and then I'm going to tell it to, when the mouse is pressed on the button, we're going to call function stop sounds. That was what I named it, right? Stop sound. All right. What we're going to do here, let's just go in and say multiplayer dot stop all. That's what we're going to do. Now, you could, if you wanted to, have a separate start and stop button for each individual sound. The functions would look exactly the same here, except instead of dot start, you would just say dot stop. That's the only difference. For this example, I'm just going to have one universal stop all. So that means multiplayer, whenever it gets this command, stop all, it's going to take any sound that's playing and stop it. And that's it. That way there's only one button to stop everything. I don't have to say, click the stop button and be, oh, no, it's the wrong one. And keep going, oh, no, I can't find the button. The audio won't stop. We don't want that. So that's why I just have one master stop button, controls everything. There you are. It stops it all. So let's test this out. So I'm going to trigger the bubbles sound again, let it play for just a little bit, and then stop it with the stop all sounds. I'll just test that for all of them real fast. And it stopped. It's still stopping. And last but not least, boom. There we go. So that's that. That is essentially using the multiplayer object to load in multiple sounds, being able to trigger each one individually with a button, as well as being able to stop the sounds with a different button. So in the next video, we'll be talking a bit about how to load up audio effects and channel our audio through them. And that's when some of the drawbacks of the multiplayer, or players.object, I should say, as well as some of its strengths will become a little more apparent. Because again, we can load up any of these sound files whenever we want, and we can route them all, but because these are all wrapped up within one larger object, they all go to the same place together. And again, that'll be a little bit more apparent in the next video. So really, if you want, very specific customizations for individual sounds, you're probably going to want to load things into a bunch of different Tone.Player objects, as opposed to one Tone.Players. If all of your sounds are going to go, in this case, to the same place, like to destination, then Tone.Players is your way to go. And I'll go more into that in the next video when I start adding in audio effects. So Like always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to drop those in the comment. If you learned something, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to learn more, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I try to get a few of these out every week when as much as I can. And I try to kind of update them each year just to, make sure everything is nice and constant and up to date. Again, everything for this video is in the description, and I'll stick a card up in the top for the previous one if you just need a little refresher about how to make a single Tone.Player object. Alright, last but not least, if you use this and make your own kind of web audio project, loading in sounds, triggering playbacks, if you already know how to do effects and want to share them, that's awesome. I love seeing that. Feel free to put links to these in the comments down below. I always love seeing what people in the community make. So that's going to be it for this one. Everyone have a great day, and I'll see you all next time that I see you. Bye.